Just to let you know, this podcast contains spoilers for a film released in 1995, 1972, and 1931. So just be careful or it will wreck it all for you. God, I love our intro music. Hello and welcome to episode 2 of the Movies in a Podshell podcast. I'm joined, he didn't like me calling him Jonny last week, so I'm going to call him it again. I'm joined by Jonny. I'm really excited to get episode 2 underway. It's going to be brilliant.
Definitely. The fact we're talking about a David Fincher film makes me especially happy, so here we go. Yeah,
this is, I thought I would, as I get to choose the films, I thought I would just delight you by choosing something I knew that you absolutely loved and are going to probably, in terms of your knowledge, make me look like an absolute amateur. So I'm pretty excited to hear what you've got to say, because every day's a learning day when I spend some time with you.
Thank you very much. I'll take that. I mean, yeah, I genuinely can't wait to get into this. I'm really excited, and I've just been waiting all week to get to the recording. So here we go.
So the first thing we're going to talk about this week is just what we've been watching. So we're just going to share what we've been watching. I know we've definitely watched one film that is the same because I was banging on about it so much. So then we both ended up watching, but we'll save that one till last. So first of all, I'll go from oldest to newest. I watched Soul, the new Disney film. Have you seen it, Jonny?
I have not, no, but tell me about it.
Oh, well, it's by Pixar. So it's about a jazz singer who essentially he gets his big break. He's a teacher, like he's always wanted to become like a jazz musician, and he gets his big break and he dies on the way to his big break, and it kind of it questions like life and stuff, and like almost like what is the point of us being here, that kind of thing. The meaning of life. It's pretty dark, like for a Pixar film. Definitely, like you can tell it's the same director as Inside Out. But it was really good. I liked it.
I was going to say I really enjoyed Inside Out, so I will definitely watch it at some point. But Inside Out completely hit the feels for me. It's such simple ideas, just the idea of the different colours being the different emotions, and then pressing the buttons of that type. I just absolutely love that. So if it's on a similar kind of basis of that idea, I think it would be up my street.
Yeah, I mean, so it was weird because Inside Out for me, I thought it was good, but it definitely wasn't. I wasn't on the hype train that everyone else is on. Like I genuinely loved it, but I wasn't like, oh my God, this is amazing. I thought there was way better Disney films. Like Coco is probably my favorite of all the Pixar, just because it just ripped my heart out and stamped all over it, and I was crying like a little baby. So yeah, no, Soul's really good. The animation's amazing. Yeah, great. How about you?
I watched Underwater after you recommended it to me, which I thoroughly enjoyed, actually. Yeah, Underwater, for those who don't know, is the last film released by 20th Century Fox before they were taken over by Disney. And
no way.
Yeah, and it was shooting in 2017. I think they'd wrapped up on it, and then it just kind of sat in a vault for 2 years as they didn't know what to do with it because the Disney merger was happening and they didn't know how to release it or what to do with it. So it ended up getting quite a limited release in January, I think it was, 2020, and then I remember seeing the trailer for it and then never hearing about it ever again, if you know what I mean. It was one of those films, but yeah, it's very heavily influenced by Alien, so funnily enough, I quite enjoyed it. But no, it was I hope we get to do an episode on it at a later date, because I think we've had a quick chat about the fact there's quite a lot of production issues it struggled with and things like that, so it seems quite an interesting one to go into. But yeah, it's Underwater. Would you say it's a horror or thriller? You'd probably say thriller rather than horror.
I thought it was a disaster film.
Okay, right, yeah.
Which is why I held off on it for so long, because I don't like disaster films really, but it's a disaster film, I guess.
The one thing I would say is a lot of what we're going to be discussing later with Seven is like tone, mood and atmosphere, and what I really enjoyed about Underwater, well, you shouldn't say enjoy, but it really felt oppressive. So the idea is they're all the way underwater, like in the deep depths of the sea, and the ideas of pressurizing environments and that kind of thing, and then instantly in the film you basically watch what can go wrong underwater, and it shows part of this base depressurizing, and it's absolutely terrifying. And as you said, it kind of jolts you straight away as soon as you watch the film. There's no kind of let up. It's look how dangerous this environment is. Before we even get on to what we will potentially find underwater, it's just being underwater is dangerous anyway. So yeah, I enjoyed it. It was good.
Yeah, and I think that's what where we differed, because I loved the fact that it started with like literally a punch in the face. Like there was no questions asked, no nothing. It was just straight in there. Kristen Stewart's just thrown into this crazy situation. You don't know what she does or nothing. You just know she's technical, whatever, like engineer, whatever. But like she's just thrown into this situation, and yeah, like it's brilliant. I really, really enjoyed it, considering the production issues it had and all that. But yeah, like I say, I would love to cover it properly, definitely, in a later episode.
Yeah, I would say the thing James referred to there, and we did talk about this, is being so similar to Alien in a lot of ways. Alien, as you know, is quite slow at the start, and it builds up the characters. And well, I say it builds up the characters, it kind of doesn't. It shows like a day in the life routine that cuts into it, whilst this film was just, before you even got the day in the life routine, it was straight in. And for me, I kind of wanted to know more about the world, and I think when we discuss this at a later date, I think we will realise there's probably is a cut somewhere where all that stuff does exist, but as the studio didn't know what to do with it, it's kind of bungled into an hour and a half film to get out there. However, a very enjoyable hour and a half, and I would recommend.
Awesome. Right, so I've got another 3 films that I did watch. Mm-hmm. Have you got any more, Jonny? Have you watched some more while we've been away that we're not going to discuss later?
Oh, I have, but these are 2 that you probably won't want to discuss. So I watched Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire with Harriet, which we really enjoyed. Classic. And we also watched together Step Up, which was good for nostalgia. Not much else to say about that.
Well, I guess I think I've seen Step Up years and years and years ago. Maybe with like a very past girlfriend, like years ago. I don't know. I can't even remember it really. Like, but then Goblet of Fire is, I think that, well, Prisoner of Azkaban is when they started getting good for me. I'm
100%.
I'm obviously very vocal about how bad I think the first 2 are with the acting in the first 2 is unforgivable for me. That hence why I always go on about the Lord of the Rings versus Harry Potter, as in I can see Harry Potter being remade at some point. I can never see Lord of the Rings being remade because it is perfect for me. But again, just another little snapshot into my...
It's funny what you said about Step Up, but I would say watching it back, it's like a highlight reel of Channing Tatum. It shows he can do a bit of acting, he does some good dancing, and he does some fighting, and it's basically all the things he ended up doing in the next 15 years afterwards. So that's
I can live with that.
Yeah, that was my takeaway from it. And I remember years ago, sorry, this is going off topic, Jamie, you maybe watch a film called, was it Fighting? And it's like the next film Channing Tatum did after Step Up. And it was,
did we watch that together?
We did indeed. So it was very much, you can see all the things that, like his, they talk about star quality coming out, because he was a backing dancer for music videos for Ciara and different people. And then I don't know what the break was, but I know he then did Step Up, and then after that he did Fighting. I can't remember who directed Fighting, but I really enjoyed that film.
I can't remember who directed it. I really enjoyed it too, and I remember it being like really brutal. The fight scenes were like the sounds and stuff they used was like were really brutal.
Back at uni, I remember you saying there's this really brutal film, you ought to watch it. It's got Channing Tatum in, and I only knew him at that point from Step Up, and you just said, and I thought, oh, this will not be a good film, and actually I really enjoyed it, and it was very different. It was obviously kind of inspired by Fight Club, not in terms of the themes and what they're doing, but in terms of the brutality of the fights and stuff. It was very visceral, very heavy.
Oh god, yeah. So Fight Club was probably one of the first films that I seen that actually, maybe outside of the 80s and stuff. I say outside of the 80s. It was one of the first films I seen when I felt like the fights were so brutal and you could feel everything. And I was like, I almost had to like, when you cringe when someone gets hit, 100%. That kind of thing. Whereas 80s films and 80s action, like people get hit and it's just like they make like that sort of like
that's the
punch sound. Whereas in Fight Club, it's just so visceral.
Completely. So the other 2 films that you said you watched, like what did you watch this week?
So I'll start from the worst, and it's 3 films. So I watched Double Dragon. I bought this on Blu-ray. It is when I say, so I am a pure Mortal Kombat apologist. I say apologist. I don't apologize for nothing because it's amazing. But Double Dragon is, I can hand on heart say it's garbage, but in like a really fun way. Like it's pure trash. And I remember I first watched it when I was a little kid. My nan, if anyone knows, so we used to walk around to like the shop, like the local like corner paper shop, whatever it is, and you could actually rent films from there sometimes. And so I rented this film called Double Dragon, and I remember I put it on, watched it all the way through, literally rewound the film. It was a VHS, and then I watched it all over again.
Amazing.
And I hadn't seen it since, and then I realized I think it's 101 Films or 88 Films, one of those two, they brought it out, and I was like, I've got to get that. It was not quite. I was expecting it to be so bad. It's got Robert Patrick in it from.
Oh wow! Okay.
Terminator.
T-1000. Yeah.
Yeah, the T-1000. Yeah, so it's got him in it. Who's like, it's just dead cheesy. Like it's fun. The special effects were real bad. Stuff we could create in After Effects nowadays.
Love it.
Stuff that you've got on your phone, like filters you can add on your phone, that are better than the special effects in that film. So then I watched Flashdance, which I had on Blu-ray. I had never seen. I mean, that was a bit weird. It was good, but it was like it's the same director that done like Indecent Proposal. He basically doesn't know how to do a film that isn't really sexy. I can't remember the director's name, but so he's got like a history of doing films that have just got like, they're just like really sexy.
Is it a bit like when Paul Verhoeven, when he did Basic, was it Paul Verhoeven when he did Basic Instinct, right? And he was kind of that era of not exploitation films, but you had the original Crash, which was about,
Oh, David Cronenberg. The guy I'm talking about that directed Flashdance is Adrian Lyne, right?
Okay.
So he directed Fatal Attraction, Flashdance, Indecent Proposal. He just loves a bit of sex, this man, like, and that's fine.
Do you think that that's the case of where the studio kind of went, he's hit a niche, it's making money, get him every single script which has that kind of indecent-ish proposal idea and hit him with it? Because that happens to directors, doesn't it? They pigeonhole them and say, he's the thriller man, or like, he's the horror man.
Oh, like Liam Neeson. Like Liam Neeson's been pigeonholed into like every like rubbish action film going on nowadays since Taken. But so Flashdance, it was I mean, what can I say? The choreography's good. There's a relationship between, like, they mention that the girl's 17. I think she's 17 or 18, and she's like literally being borderline like groomed by this 40-year-old man, and it's like, he's dead nice throughout the film, but it's just weird. Like you just wouldn't nowadays. It just it's a bit dated. Flashdance, and then the last film, again, carrying on with the sexiness, Shame. Have you seen Shame?
It's Carey Mulligan, right?
It's Carey Mulligan, and it is Michael Fassbender. Yes, I have. And trust me, it is a big performance from Michael Fassbender. And when I say big performance, I mean big performance. He is a sex addict, and it pulls absolutely zero punches. But anyway,
one of the most depressing films I've ever watched, I would say that.
Have you seen it?
I have. Yeah.
Oh, right. Sorry, I didn't realise you'd seen it. Sorry.
It's okay. I remember. Wasn't it up for Oscar contention at the time? I'm pretty sure that's why I would.
Yeah. Definitely. Okay. It's critically acclaimed.
Yeah. I remember that film making me feel pretty bleak. But Carey Mulligan, I'd seen in I'm getting my timings wrong now. I'm actually trying to remember if Drive was before or after.
Right, here you go. They're both released in 2011. There you go.
Oh wow, okay. Well, I definitely had seen Drive first, and I watched Shame on digital release afterwards. But I really, again, a film I'd hope we get to talk about another time. I really enjoyed Drive, I enjoyed her performance in Drive. So, but then Shame was a completely separate, very very different tone and style, and I really enjoyed it. As I said, I enjoyed it, but it's hard hitting and quite difficult to deal with. But it was.
It's like it's a character study. Carey Mulligan, her performance in it, and Michael Fassbender, both amazing. She does, and I'm sure everyone's talked about this to death, but for a reason, right? Her rendition, she does a performance of New York, New York, and honestly, it's like the most melancholic but like beautiful thing, and it'd bring a tear to a glass eye. You can see the hurt and the trouble that she's carrying with her, and I'm sure the performance was actually live as well. The film's worth watching just for that, and obviously if you like a bit of Michael Fassbender.
He is a brilliant actor, though, and I think there was a phase I remember in 2010s-ish, around that time he just started doing more and more, because I remember he was in Inglourious Bastards, he was in X-Men First Class. I'm not saying they're gold-plated, but he did 3 of those, I think.
I need to stop you. Inglourious Bastards is gold-plated.
No, that is. I was correcting myself for the X-Men films. Let's be clear. But no, I always enjoyed him in those films, I must say, though. This is really sad. The reason why I really like Michael Fassbender was in X-Men First Class, it's based in the 60s, isn't it? And there's this really cool scene when he infiltrates this boat, and as he does it, he's in like the black... I know what you're going to say. And it's just like Sean Connery in the old Bonds.
Yeah.
Like, this is amazing. And if it ain't, and that was the point when everyone, any British actor is like, he's the next James Bond, and you kind of went, to be fair, off that, fine.
I remember you talking to me about that because you were so hyped that like he's in the all black.
Do you know, I'm pretty sure we saw this at the cinema together, and I think that's why this discussion happened.
Oh yeah. Probably wouldn't surprise me. Anyway, that's what we've been watching. The next part of the show, we are going to be discussing one of Jonny's favourite films, and it's up there for me as well. We're talking about Seven, directed by David Fincher.
We see a deadly sin on every street corner, in every home, and we tolerate it. We tolerate it because it's common. It's trivial. We tolerate it morning, noon, and night. Well, not anymore.
I'm going to take us through the premise for the 1% of people that don't know what the film's about, and probably the 0% of people listening to this podcast about films that don't know what it's about. I'm sure you all know what it's about, and then Jonny will probably give us a little technical masterclass. Probably. I'm sorry, I'm hyping you up a bit too much now. You'll be fine, buddy. Right. Seven is a serial killer thriller, basically following a serial killer who's killing people in the style of the 7 deadly sins, and it's up to Morgan Freeman, who is basically a detective that's a week away from retirement. Brad Pitt then comes into the fold as his partner, who's a bit of a rookie, and their relationship is, shall we say, a little bit... how would you describe it? Their relationship's pretty bad to start off with. At
the start, it's Mills is a young rookie who kind of feels like he can make a difference, and Somerset is the tired, world-weary character. And Mills is very emotive and very reactive, was Somerset's very in control, poised and methodical. And because of that, at the start, they just instantly clashed. Like, when you meet Mills, he's instantly starting an argument with a police officer over coffee and all this kind of thing, and he's being very difficult with people, and Somerset just doesn't respect that. They butt heads a lot at the start, and Somerset kind of gets him to leave the scene and allow him to get on with it, because he feels he's more of a hindrance rather than a benefit, and he says, go and interview someone about what happened rather than allowing him to investigate the crime scene. So at the start, the relationship's not great. He's
got zero respect for Mills. He's seen 100 Millses come through in his lifetime, and he's so close to retirement, he just wants to get through his week, and he just can't be bothered, can he? He's got zero time for it. He's seen it all before. And Mills is this, so the thing I took from Mills is he's the most positive person in that whole entire film. Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I think it's the naivety, because it's made clear early on he's been transferred to the city, but he asked to come to the city. We find out later on it's because something happened to Mills's partner on his old job, so he wanted to switch up, so he came to the city. But there's a couple of things we ought to talk about in this opening scene. So the first thing we actually see is Somerset just kind of getting his tools ready for his day, and it kind of shows the mundanity of how fed up he is with his life. As you said, he's about to retire, but we were talking about with Dredd last week. It's the idea that the central character's just used to what they're doing, and it's every day for them, was for us it's watching a crime film's exciting because it's different, but they always make a point of saying how boring it is to these people. This is just their lives, and it's quite grim. The first crime scene, Jamie, what did you think of the disgusting apartment in the first crime scene? It reminded me of uni. Oh god, our kitchen at uni. I guess that's what stuck from. That's the only thing I could remember really from from when I first watched Seven was that it's Sloth. It's Greed. The fat man like sort of doubled over. That's what I always remember. That and the rain. The fact that it's raining in every single scene in LA. So every single scene that takes place in LA, it's raining.
Yep.
So yeah, I mean, the first scene is just, it's dark, it's dingy, it's the color palette. He presents his color palette there straight away. It's full of greens, yellows, and then the one thing I noticed, that the only time in the film is bright. It's the first time Morgan Freeman visits their apartment. I know I'm jumping ahead, but that's what I noticed. Like when they're in the apartment, it's really bright, so it's almost like Fincher like presented that like nice, like jovial setting, but everywhere else in the film it's just that color palette all the way through. So yeah, I guess that's how it's presented. It's pretty morose, isn't it?
Yeah, I think someone described it as the walls feel sticky just from looking at it. It was quite funny. Fincher talked, so I listened to the director's commentary, and Fincher said there's a representative from New Line who produced the film came to see what they were doing on this set, and they walked in and they saw just this horrible pitch black room with hardly any light coming in, this deceased large body which is is rotted away and all pale, and then there's just grime and slime on the walls, and apparently they went, yep, everything's fine here, and they left because it was just such a grim environment to be around.
Wow.
So I thought that was great. But just a little about, Jamie's touched upon some really good things with the cinematography. So when Fincher shot Seven, he really wanted it to look dark, and not just through the lighting, but actually the way the film is chemically processed. So most films have like a pass go through. And this, just to say, Seven was 1995, so from what I know, there's very little digital work done on it. There was some colour correction done for the Blu-rays, but that was for then. I think the original films were all still done photochemically processed for colour timing. But with the process they did was they actually, with the Kodak film stock, apparently it was quite a thin film stock, so what they did is they washed it through again, but it's called a process for retaining the silver, so it makes the contrast really sharp, because it would make the blacks in the image even darker, and then that would make the highlights seem even brighter, if that makes sense. So whenever a torchlight or anything comes in, it seems super bright, because the black levels are so low, or the gamma's so high, however you want to word it. But that's similar to the process that Spielberg used for Minority Report. Saving Private Ryan had bleach bypass process, so it's a similar idea. I just think it's different levels of the way you do it, from my understanding.
And there we go. Do you know what? He hadn't even spoken to me about any technical, but I told you get a technical masterclass, and that's what you've just had. I'm sitting here just as educated as you guys, and I'll tell you what though, when Jonny's talking about the torch and stuff and how bright it is, the effect that has is so startling, and it looks wicked.
Seven kind of set the idea of what a noir thriller in modern day looks like, and that was the tone people went for. But the other thing to touch upon, and James already talked about, is the rain. That was half a choice for creative reasons, that I think other parts of it was for budgetary reasons. So they didn't want it to be the film to be set in a specific city, but they actually shot it all in LA to keep costs down. So by having rain towers, Brad Pitt says he just remembers every time there was rain towers, they just got absolutely soaked all the time. But it was really good for hiding continuity, so if the weather's bad outside or what have you, you won't notice. And it was also good for kind of covering the location. So but the other thing is, it made a really oppressive atmosphere, and David Fincher is on record as saying how influential Blade Runner was to him, and obviously that's a film again which utilises a lot of rain and smoke to create atmosphere. They obviously chose to do that again. It
definitely adds another element. I don't mean for that to be like an element because water's an element. I don't mean that, but it definitely does give you that. It's almost like a claustrophobic feeling when it's just. It's always raining, like everything's murky and dark.
It's oppressive.
I love it. Yeah,
it's just so oppressive, and it just feels like wherever you go, you can't escape. Rain's the one thing you can't escape from, right? So even when it's daytime in these films, it's so oppressively dark. The next thing I really wanted to go into, which I found really interesting, was after we've gone through this crime scene and we find out for the first time that it might be one of the 7 deadly sins. We're not sure at this point the link, because we only know the one crime, but Somerset's kind of convinced there'll be more. After that, we cut to the title sequence. Now, this title sequence is so different and so distinctive to what has come before it. So when Alfred Hitchcock, I'm going to talk a lot about links between Hitchcock and David Fincher, which will come apparent later on in the podcast, but also from the idea of David Fincher was heavily inspired by a lot of his films. He talked a lot about them when he was making Alien 3. This is a Hitchcockian moment, this shower scene, and etc. But Hitchcock used to use opening titles to kind of set the mood of the film, rather than just be so-and-so's in it, so-and-so's in it, so-and-so's in it. It's the idea of using it to tell a story rather than just having credits. So Fincher took this a step further with Seven. They had their cinematographer shoot this opening sequence of the serial killer writing the diaries, which you see later in the film, and you see him shaving his fingerprints off his fingers. It's really quite grotesque, but you have the titles come on.
Yeah.
But when this was shot, they said to Fincher, you can't shoot in a shaky cam style for this sequence because you have to, the way credits are from the studio is it has to be straight and do this. And he said, well, why? He said, I'm trying to see this through the viewpoint of a serial killer, so it can be whatever I want it to be, so I'm going to do it completely differently. So he did. So I really love that. I think it's a really good way of getting into the film. And if anybody's watching the later stuff like Mindhunter, that has a similar-esque intro of showing... Have you watched Mindhunter?
I've not, no. But when you're talking about the writing down and stuff and all that kind of stuff, I've seen a lot of that in Zodiac.
Yeah. David Fincher's, like a lot of people who study his work talk about, he's obsessed with the idea of information. So his films aren't particularly action focused, but it's learning information as an audience, then what it means to the characters. He hardly ever uses close-ups, so when he does, it's a really important moment. And when he does show a close-up, it's because they've learned the information, which is key. And he also talks about the idea of people know that as a director you can show absolutely anything, so there's almost as much importance on what you don't show, which links really nicely to in this film, which is you don't see the first 6 murders take place at all. You see the after effects.
No, of course you don't know.
You see the crime scenes, but you experience it through the detectives. So a few reasons for this. One, you get to experience it and solve the crime with the detectives and learn as they learn, highlighting the importance of information and finding clues. The other reason this is done, I think, is because you never see the shot of, in your typical thriller, you'd see, the stalker's coming through the window, approaching by the window, or he's walking on the street nearby. And Finch chose not to do that because by not showing who the killer is at this point, you have no idea who he is. You don't know it's a he, actually. You don't know what they look like. And also, it leaves the imagination up to worse ideas. So seeing the crime scene and thinking about what could have happened is almost worse than whatever he could show you. Whatever he could depict to you is worse because your imagination is always scarier than what you actually, what can be presented to you. So I think it's really clever how that's used throughout the film, because at the time when it came out, and I won't get into the ending yet, but people were saying how shocking and how disgusting and disturbing the film was, but they thought they'd seen far more than they ever actually saw. So much of it was kind of, left to the influence of your imagination rather than actually showing you anything particularly horrific.
Yeah, and one of the things that a lot of these kind of films, these serial killer films where you're tracking down this secret serial killer, whatever it is, this Midsummer Murder type figure, it's strange because so many of these kind of films fall flat on their face because it's like, oh, that's the killer, that person I haven't seen in it the whole time, and that's really boring. Like, and do you know what I mean? Like, so when it's presented to you, the person that hasn't been in it all the whole time, and it's just some random stranger, it has zero impact, and you're like, that's a bit rubbish. But with this, for the reason of, like, you see his apartment and the chase along the building, which I'll go into that because that's definitely a rip from Hitchcock for me. That chase Brad Pitt has, so you kind of know who this person is now, and he's a bit of a nutter. You don't know what he looks like. And so when it's finally revealed of who it is, not the fact that it's Kevin Spacey, which is actually terrifying enough as itself for all of us, but it's actually like he's a creepy guy, because all of those ideas all come together into this man who's just handed himself in.
Just actually, I think something I wanted to touch on before is a little bit about David Fincher and actually doing this film, because this is the first film David Fincher actually puts on his filmography as his first film, despite the fact he had directed a film before, a film which...
Oh, what film was that, Jonny?
might be called Alien 3. So just a little about this. So Fincher initially did commercials. He worked for a studio called Propaganda Films, which he was one of the founders of. They made lots of controversial adverts. There's a big anti-smoking campaign he did, which was a smoking fetus, and it was kind of got him internationally recognised as being a controversial visual artist. Ridley Scott used to do commercials at the start as well, so it was this kind of a similar path. But then he went on to shooting music videos, and one of the most famous ones was Madonna's Vogue, which obviously got him a lot of clout in the industry. And Alien 3, I won't go into the whole shrubs of Alien 3, but it was a production which was basically greenlit on a script which they then never filmed with, and they'd got through 3 directors by this point: Vincent Ward, Rennie Harlin, who did Die Hard 2. David Fincher was kind of brought on because they thought they could control him and he'd just be a shooter, and what they didn't bargain for was David Fincher is an all-encompassing classic director who wanted to have big say on the script, big say on the casting, big say on everything. And he battled to
26 years old.
27 years old he was at the time, and he battled tooth and nail, and he rarely to this day talks about the experience because it was so difficult. The film that was eventually released, he said, was 25% of what he actually wanted to do. But for context, the budget of that film was about 50 million in whatever that would be in inflation from 1992. And they were basically spent millions of dollars on sets which they didn't even need. They'd scrapped down, rebuilt, and then he basically had to write a script in 3 weeks before they began shooting to work around the sets they had, etc. The point being of this was Fincher's first film was he had no real control, and one thing people will tell you about David Fincher is his authorship of his films. He has control on pretty much every part of the process. So Seven's the first film where that really happened, but the reason he was allowed to do that was because he wasn't making the third film in a large big budget studio production. He was working for New Line Cinema, which was a smaller studio, and he was given a lot more creative control. And another reason he was given a lot more creative control was because the budget was smaller, first and foremost, but 2, when he got Brad Pitt and Morgan Freeman in, Brad Pitt was on the rise at this point. He wasn't complete star status, I think it would be fair to say. He was big but not
definitely, and I was going to mention that later.
So Brad Pitt backed Fincher, so a lot of we'll talk about this later, Fincher actually got extra budget for the film basis on the fact that Morgan Freeman and Brad Pitt backed him so much, which was so different to his previous film where the producers didn't back him. Basically every Hollywood exec who he needed on his side didn't back him. His cast did, but that's not enough to save a film. So Seven is the first film he had full creative control, and I think although if you watch Alien 3 back, there are so many shots which we'll discuss later which are like for like, so his eye was always there to see what he could actually do with his tone. And this whole film is shot low angles looking up. I mean, again, we talked about this last week. That shows the ceiling, shows you're trapped, an oppressive atmosphere, and the walls are closing in. And the whole of Seven feels like that. You don't want to be there, and you're stuck there. That is the entire thing of that film, right?
Yeah, no, totally. I totally get that. And people don't. I think people love to bash Alien 3. But actually, the cinematography is absolutely, stunning. There's so many scenes in Alien 3 where, actually, if you just watch it and be let's just watch the film objectively and don't compare it to Alien or Aliens, it's, really nice. It's, a really nice film. There's a few, obviously really weird parts that you've explained. But, yeah, so I fully get you with that. The one thing... So... When you mentioned the intro sequence, I was like, God, I hate this song. This is a horrible song. And then as the score came in, the score is awesome. Howard Shore strikes again.
Yes.
Who is honestly Lord of the Rings, if you don't know. He's pretty much, he's done loads of other stuff. It's a shame that Howard Shore's not mentioned in the same breath as John Williams or Hans Zimmer, because he's just as good.
I'd agree with
in my humble opinion. But yeah, so that chase scene when Brad Pitt is chasing Kevin Spacey, How about that for Vertigo vibes? So when he's chasing along that rooftop, I was like, this is so Vertigo. Yeah. It's unbelievable. What is that? Am I right? Or am I going nuts?
I'll be honest, I didn't take that from it, because from Vertigo doesn't use much handheld. I mean, it wasn't really a style thing to do at that point, and it's kind of, the shot is they're running from right to left on screen a lot more, if that makes sense. Whilst this sequence, very intentionally, so handhelds used 3 times in this film, one of which I won't discuss yet because it will ruin things later on, but for this sequence is the first time handheld is used, and it's to show that how out of control the characters are. Brad Pitt said the one thing he hated in action films was, in a chase, they always knew where the person they're chasing was going. And it's like the path is already set. So in this chase, how many times does Brad Pitt stop and go, I don't know where he's gone, looking down the stairs, don't know if he's gone down or up, next bit, don't know if he's in that window, goes in the wrong house, wrong, you know. So I love that fact about the chase. I think that's great. It does make it feel more realistic, the fact that he can't see where he is half of the time. And he gets it wrong, doesn't he? At the end of the chase, he's gone the wrong way and he gets caught out. That's the whole point, you know. But in terms of Vertigo vibes, that's what I actually hadn't thought of. I really like that. Yeah, great.
Yeah, I wasn't looking for the link either. I just thought it just made me feel that way, like the way the buildings and stuff. But then, what an impactful scene after that first hour of slow burn. That scene there is so tense, and even I was sitting there like my heart was racing. Brad Pitt is like, did he not break his arm on a windshield or something? There was like, he broke his arm and there was like tendons and stuff.
So they had to write that into the script, and this is another reason where they'd really been kind of screwed over by the rain, because the reason they had the rain was to cover up all these issues with the production in terms of hiding the location and what have you, and then all of a sudden the rain's the main reason why he slipped and cut up his arm as much as he did, and it was a real issue for the production. But as I said, they wrote it into the script and it never bothers me when I watch it. I think it works well. You've mentioned that chase scene. I've got to say my favourite bit of that chase scene is actually at the end of the chase. Kevin Spacey's character is called John Doe at this point. So as Mills chases down John Doe at the end of the foot chase, he kind of gets it wrong and he's in the wrong place at the wrong time and he's injured himself. He's down on the ground and he looks at this puddle, and the shot and the cinematography for this shot, I don't know if you can picture the one I mean, it's in the puddle. You see the reflection of John Doe with his hat, and it's a proper old noir shot, big trilby hat on, and he steps forward, and I watched it, and it's just one of those, sometimes with a film you see a shot and you think, I could screenshot it and hang it up and frame it and just look at it all day. That is one of those shots, and for me this is why I love Fincher. It's the attention to detail. I know for a fact he's probably done that between 10 to 80 takes because he's nuts with things. I think
he's a psycho.
At the start I would have said he probably did less takes because with New Line he probably didn't have the time, but I know nowadays he does an insane amount of takes. But the attention to detail and the light, everything to get it, I just absolutely love it. And then straight after that, John Doe pulls a gun on Mills, so you get this really tight close-up, which I sent Jamie on WhatsApp the other day, really tight close-up of Brad Pitt, and there's a pistol to the side of his head, right in his temple. And that shot, as I said, and this is why I say people should give Alien 3 the time of day, is an exact replica of the shot from the film before, which is the alien being right in the face next to Ripley, and literally it is a mirror shot. If you put them side by side, they are exactly the same. So I love stuff like that. And in other Fincher films, if you watch Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, there's a lot of shots which are similar to 7, but there's also a lot of shots which are similar to Alien 3, and it just shows how his eye from the age of 27, which depresses me when I'm 28 and I've not made a $50 million Hollywood budget film, even at that age he was so knew what he wanted to do. And I just love that, like being able to get that out on screen is just, I find that incredible, I really do.
Or is he a one-trick pony? I'm joking. I'm out here like fishing with my fishing rod. I'm totally joking. No, he's not. He's a genius.
I'd quickly touch on that and say that I think recently he really has broadened his scope of what he does do. And I think people easily kind of go, oh, he's the serial killer guy. And it's kind of, if anyone's watched Zodiac, and hopefully we'll probably talk about that at a later date, Zodiac's a very different type of serial killer film to what 7 is. 7, to me, he describes it as a buddy cop movie, which becomes a thriller, which then becomes a horror. And that, for me, perfectly sums up the film. Whilst a film like Zodiac is kind of a slower burn. I would say more like a character study almost. I don't know.
Yeah, Zodiac. It reminds me, I'll tell you what is Zodiac is probably a really good link to that film. Have you seen All the President's Men?
Yes.
Very very similar. Like obviously one's a murder case, but it's both. It's all just paperwork. It's just all mostly paperwork based film. But it's really super interesting, super engaging. But it's just like 2 hours and 45 minutes long or whatever it is. But yeah, so I mean, let's talk about. Obviously, we know Morgan Freeman and Brad Pitt's character. They kind of strike up a good relationship. Morgan Freeman knows Brad Pitt's wife, who and she confides in Morgan Freeman quite a lot. There is like a diner scene when Brad Pitt's wife calls Morgan Freeman, and they sort of there's this moment where they build this relationship, isn't there?
Yeah, it's a really sad scene because basically Gwyneth Paltrow's character, herself and Brad Pitt were actually together at the time, because everyone said Gwyneth Paltrow will not do this film, and then he said I'll have a word with her, and apparently she came in and read it and was like, okay, cool. So yeah, she is a primary school teacher who's moved to the city, and there's this really heartbreaking scene in the diner when she says, you know, the conditions here are horrible, and I'm not an actor, so I'm not going to try and do it, but the inflection of her voice, you just believe her that this place is a complete dive. She doesn't want to be here, and she's talking about how the children don't have the same opportunities, and you know, she starts talking to Morgan Freeman about his previous relationship, Detective Somerset, I should say, and says, you know, why did you never have a wife? How did this not work out? And he talks about it and says, one day, I found out my partner was pregnant, and I said to her, how can you raise a child in this world, in this environment, seeing the things I've seen? And he said, I pushed her away until she did get rid of the child, and they separated. And it's so bleak, it's such a nihilistic, dark tone. And then the sad thing is, he says to Gwyneth Paltrow's character, he says, if you get rid of this child, because she reveals that she herself is pregnant, and he says, if you ever decide to not have this child, you must never tell Mills, because he knows Mills is such an emotive character that it will break him. And it's a really tragic scene. I get quite frustrated because I went back and looked at old reviews of Seven, and people talked about how Gwyneth Paltrow was hard done by. She didn't have a lot to do. But I think the scene she is in, she's so good. Not one point do I question anything. I believe it. I'm bought into it. I feel sorry for her. Like, even from the start of the movie that you talked about, the dinner scene with Morgan Freeman, it's quite clear she doesn't want to be there. There's even a little joke Fincher puts in, it's very black humour, but they live right by the subway, and every hour the whole apartment shakes as they're having dinner. Yeah.
She's like, and do you know what? We haven't really spoken about it, but she is one of the most important characters in the whole film, because she's the catalyst for everything that happens in the end, and she is the reason that the most positive person in the whole film is broken by the end. And as obviously we'll speak about the ending pretty soon, but it's actually like it's not a happy film. It doesn't end well, and it's so rare for that to happen in films. I mean, it's a lot more commonplace nowadays with like Game of Thrones, that kind of thing. But yeah, the bad guy wins.
Yeah.
If you didn't know, but we'll really go into that. So yeah, she's brilliant. I really, really liked her in this film, and it was so believable.
100%. And another thing that I find really interesting is, I don't know if you picture that diner scene when it's going ahead, the sound design's really interesting, because most films at that point is, if everyone's having a conversation, you kind of mute out all the audio around you, so you only hear the conversation. And Fincher's played with this a few times. He does it in The Social Network as well. Is the background noise is oppressively loud, so it's hard to hear. Not like Christopher Nolan's Tenet, I must say, but
not that hard to hear.
Not that hard to hear, but it's the idea of Fincher said he wanted this world to be so oppressive that you hear every noise. So when you're out in the street, you don't just hear the rain, you hear the cats screaming in the street, you hear two homeless people having an argument, you hear a car running into something, you hear stereo from down. It has to be an oppressive wall of sound of, I don't want to be in this place. And the diner's the same thing. You hear every single noise you could possibly hear within the diner, if that makes any sense. And it's again showing how there's no escape. It's an oppressive atmosphere. She can't get away from it. Jamie's talking about the next steps, so I think he should lead us into the next big dramatic reveal which happens in the film. What
happens next is they've kind of gone through the six sins. Is it the six? No, it's 5. So it's 5. So they've gone through the 5. I mean, we can't go into every one of them. like I say, we'll be here all night. But so in the end, John Doe, Kevin Spacey, hands himself in. So the guys are like, they're on the verge of catching him. They haven't quite caught him, and then all of a sudden he walks in, blood on his hands. Blood on his hands?
Yep, correct.
Yep. So he's got blood on his hands, and he walks in to the police station and says, "Here I am." At that point, they arrest him. And they interview. They don't even interview him. You only see them speaking to his
attorney.
Lawyer, yeah, that's it. Yeah, you only see them speaking to his lawyer, and basically he's given a list of demands. Like, so essentially, Mills and Somerset must accompany him to a location, and then he will confess to everything.
To find the...
Is that right?
Yeah, and the thing is, Somerset and Mills know something's not right because he's done 5 of the 7 deadly sins, and they're saying something doesn't smell right here. Something's got to happen for these final 2. Now, a few things to talk about. Jamie talks about the scene where John Doe hands himself in. What's amazing is that happens about an hour and 20 minutes into the film. Now, when Fincher took on the film, the reason he took it on was for 2 reasons. One is to do with the ending, which we won't discuss yet because we're not there. But there is a key ending point which attracted Fincher, and he was sent the wrong version of the script because the studio was so against using that ending. They had multiple versions, but Fincher got sent, in inverted commas, the wrong one, which ended up being the finale. And he said, "I will only make this if that's the case." And all the way through shooting, they tried to change it, but Brad Pitt and Morgan Freeman went, "Nope, we're with David, we're sticking with his idea. This is it, this is the film, this is why it's different." So more on that later, because I don't want to ruin that section just yet. But in terms of John Doe scene, what's terrifying of that is he gets out of taxi, completely cool, calm as day. You see him get out of this taxi, the shot reveals from his feet and it pans up, and then as he walks in, Somerset Mills just having a conversation, and then he says, detective, and then before you know it, just screams, "Detective!" It's like, and the room doesn't stop. Because in real life, the room wouldn't stop. It would keep going. They'd be like, "Who's this madman?" And then suddenly there's a woman behind him, and they pull a gun on him. And then he's, hands on the ground. And it's terrifying. But we will learn shortly when Jamie discusses it, the significance of the blood on his hands. Because at this point, you don't know why he has blood on his hands. But we find out shortly whose blood that is, which leads to the climax of the film. Yeah,
and what a climax. Probably one of the most shocking endings in a film ever. In 1995. So yeah, they essentially they have to accompany him to this place in the middle of nowhere, really, isn't it? It looks like a kind of a desert almost, and this is like the climactic part of the film when sort of he gets Mills is standing there with John Doe, and essentially there's a van driving down this road from a distance, and they're like, "Oh my god, what's this?" Somerset goes and runs to the van to try and stop it, like, because they think they don't know what it is, and it's just a delivery driver, and the delivery driver, as you all know, I'm sure you all know, hands him a box, and here come the famous lines. Well, soon enough, Morgan Freeman thinks it's all a bit dodgy, but he opens a box anyway, and unfortunately, why am I laughing? Unfortunately, it is the head of Gwyneth Paltrow, and at this time, Brad Pitt's got the gun on John Doe. They're quite a bit away from each other, so Morgan Freeman starts running towards Brad Pitt, put the gun down, because he's like, and then that's when we get the "what's in the box," and that's then the iconic scene. Johnny, do you want to tell us a little bit about that scene? I'm sure you've probably got something for me.
I've got so much to say about that scene. Have you? So the first thing is, a lot of reviews at the time talked about how gratuitous it was, the fact you saw Gwyneth Paltrow's head. You never see Gwyneth Paltrow's head in the box.
No, you don't.
You do not see a thing. The box opens up and you see a speck of blood. But as I said, upon rewatch, when you rewatch this film, when John Doe walks in that police station, you realise that the blood he has on him is Mills's wife. It's Gwyneth Paltrow's character's blood. And the first time I watched the film, obviously you don't get that, but on rewatch I thought, oh my god, he doesn't know at that point that crime's already happened. He's already beheaded her, and that in itself is crazy.
Yeah.
But a few things about the ending of that film. They had to go back and shoot the ending months later.
I've seen this.
They'd done parts of it and parts they hadn't done. But what I find interesting is the studio are still debating about this ending, and Fincher wanted a helicopter to kind of add a bit of production value to it. So he showed it them. They screened it without the helicopter, and they went, "Oh, okay, it's impactful, but not as big as it could be." So because of having the backing of Morgan Freeman and Brad Pitt, who argued for this helicopter, he got the extra budget to get the helicopter in. But what's great is from the aerial view, it really builds the tension because you're following the car, and then they get to a point and there's all these like electric pylons, and they go, "Oh, we can't follow them there. We'll head off that way." And this is when it all goes wrong. As soon as that helicopter veers left, it's almost like a visual metaphor of where it's all going. It goes, "Oh, okay." They swerve away, and then Jamie's described what happens. But as soon as that delivery van takes a long time to arrive, there's a lot of time for us to get tense and think, what is going on? We don't know it's a delivery van. We think it could be a bomber, could be more people, could be, there's no...
Exactly, yeah.
You don't know. And, I know the ending of that film, but you still get palpitations that car's coming. That van's coming, sorry. And then this is the... we didn't talk about the second time handhelds used in the film, but the second time handhelds used in the film is another scene where the characters are out of control, and it's John Doe knows that Brad Pitt and Somerset and Mills have broken into his apartment. Again, this is a really good scene because one, Brad Pitt's emotive character decides to kick the door in after he had after he was held at gunpoint by John Doe. So he doesn't care about getting a warrant. He just decides to do it, even though he's told not to. And he pays off a street worker to lie to say that she knew, so they could get round. You see what I mean?
Yeah, I remember that. I love that. Yeah.
So there's that side. Yeah. Again, it shows emotive, reactive. Okay. And John Doe calls them up, so they try and find the phone. And when they can't find the phone, it's all handheld. So that's the point I wanted to raise. But at the end of the film, what's amazing is very simple cinematography. John Doe is kneeling on the ground at this point, isn't he? And when they show him, it's locked off, tripod shots, calm, controlled. Soon as it's revealed what's in the box, Morgan Freeman starts running. Shaky cam, handheld. Yeah. Every shot of Brad Pitt is handheld, panicking, out of control. So it's handheld. Every shot, because it's in control, because John Doe is in control, locked off, steady, to show the power in the scene. The final two sins left are envy and wrath. So John Doe reveals that my sin is envy, because he says that I went to your house, I tried to play happy family, she wouldn't play along, so I cut off her head. And at that point, Brad Pitt's gone from thinking something's happening to knowing it has happened. He won't listen to Somerset when he says, drop the gun. So you see this amazing, it's like a mid close-up of Brad Pitt holding the pistol.
Mate.
Shaky cam, and he's crying, but it's his internally, you just watch him go, I could do it, but my career, but he killed her, I don't know. And then he says something about the child, and he didn't know she was pregnant. And as soon as he says about the baby, it goes to that prophecy that Somerset said, which is never tell him if you ever get rid of the child, because he won't cope. And as he knows this, I don't know how many seconds you think, 10-15 seconds of him choosing between. Even thinking about it gets you. Yeah. And you see a flash of Gwyneth Paltrow's face, not the head in the box, just her face. It's a flicker. It's like one single frame of her, maybe from the scene in the morning where she's just looking directly at camera, smiling at Brad Pitt, and bang, he shoots him. And at that point his career's over, game over. But not only does he shoot him once, as an audience, knowing if you were in that situation, you feel like you would pull the trigger more than once, and he caps him 5-6 times the whole round. He just
empties it. Yeah.
And there's this look on Brad Pitt's face, and it's like his soul's just come out of him. He's just I can't describe it. He's just absolutely haunted, and he just walks away, and it's beautiful in a dark sense, but just You tell me what you thought about it, but just for me, every time I watch it, what's happening. But his performance at that point, I think, is just so good, so strong.
Definitely that part is, and that visual of Brad Pitt's face when he's holding the gun, that depth of field shot. It's classic Fincher as well. That depth of field shot. That's a pure Fincher shot. The tears in his eyes, the emotion on his face, that for me that acting piece when he is sort of being torn apart, that is the birth of a superstar. That is like the birth of Brad Pitt when he is, and that is like, this guy is a superstar. That scene, and I was it's beautiful. It is a beautiful scene. I know what you're saying. Like, I completely get it. It's really bad, but it's one of my favorite stills in a film. That scene with that gun. And I know we people talk about it all the time. Again, like, it's talked about loads for a reason. God, his it's, you know, I'll say it reminds me. It doesn't at all, but you know the Simpsons episode when this is me going on the Simpsons from 7, when Ralph sends Lisa a Valentine's card that says "I choose you," and then Bart's like he keeps rewinding the tape. He's like, you can actually see the moment where his heart rips in half, like that bit where he's like, So, but the bit where like Brad Pitt is sort of going through those emotions. Oh my goodness, it is the birth of a superstar.
What's really interesting is looking at the reviews at the time. Is a lot of people criticised the fact that Fincher was so in on the visuals that he didn't concentrate on the acting, and it makes the acting seem wooden at times. Now, for me personally, I kind of people talked about Brad Pitt's acting, not the last scene. Let's count the last scene as a separate bit, because I think everybody understood that was a very, very well done section. But through the rest of the film, they said he's quite abrasive and it's not particularly polished. But I thought that was the point of his character. He's a rookie, and he says things he shouldn't say. He's very emotive and reactive, and Morgan Freeman's this calm, understated, it's all in the face. He doesn't have to say much. You just know with Morgan Freeman. And I thought that was the point. So I find it really interesting when I watch films. I try and contextualize them for when they came out at the time, because watching 7 now, it won't have the impact it had in 95, because we've seen a lot of horror movies which have been based on 7 in terms of the style, the look, how it dramatically reveals situations, the type of storytelling. But at the time, it was, you know, as I said, people were so horrified by it. But the truth is now, I would say, as much as I love 7, I don't think it probably has the same impact it would have had back then in terms of what audiences are used to. Yeah,
definitely. So I think that it's probably not as shocking now as it was back then, because now it's definitely more popular to shock the audience and do things come from left field. Like, we all expect happy endings, don't we, really?
Yeah.
And the scene, so that, with the Morgan Freeman and Gwyneth Paltrow scene, it's like really similar to the Harry Met Sally scene in the diner when that's like heartbreaking as well, and they're also and that's also a really not a happy ending. The way film's gone, we're trying to find new ways to shock the audience.
Correct.
Hence why film has changed so much, and we will actually talk about a film in a minute, probably, when from Hitchcock, who films have got more brutal and more exploitative as time's gone on,
even throughout his career, which we'll touch on shortly. Just a quick point on the ending of the film, which is we've talked about being so important. Fincher said his argument for using that version, the ending with the head in the box, he said, in 25 years, someone who'll be watching in a college dorm and they say, hey, do you remember that film where the guy put the woman's head in the box? And it's true, like, people, even if you don't know 7, you know that it's that kind of thing. So
yeah, definitely, it's iconic at this point. I think it's a cult, and it's a cult film, like much like Fight Club. But so anyway, I've got a couple of questions. I put a couple of questions out to guys. If you didn't know, I've got an Instagram account called @Moviesinapodshell. So why don't you give me a follow if you like my dulcet tones. What I did was put some questions out to some of my followers. So Movie Scenes and Shit says, would the movie be better or worse if Denzel Washington hadn't turned down the Mills role? This is a really interesting question for me.
You go first. I'm intrigued.
Again, so for me, I'm looking at this, like, I see this and I'm like, right, when I was speaking about Brad Pitt, like, it's the birth of a superstar. So straight away, I don't want Brad Pitt not to be in this, because it means that it's missing from his filmography, and I feel like it was so important for him. But as well as that, I don't know how many films I've seen from Denzel Washington where he is. I can't imagine Morgan Freeman dominating Denzel like he dominates Brad Pitt. Like, Brad Pitt plays a really good sort of like rookie, and what am I looking for?
He's streetwise, but he dumbs it down. Like, if you listen to Brad Pitt in the audio commentary, he's a super intelligent guy. I don't know what my perception of him was before, but listening to the director's commentary was really interesting, because he talked about how he wanted Mills to be quite dumb. Yeah, I can't. Do you know, I never thought about that idea because Morgan Freeman is such a dominating presence on screen. I don't know if Denzel Washington would have done the performance where he would have played down to that, but then I just think actors are so good at interpreting roles that maybe Mills's character would have been completely different if it wasn't Brad Pitt. I think a lot of it being the way it was because of Brad Pitt. You know, it's his take on the character. I don't know how much of that was in the script initially. That would be the question.
Yeah, and like I say, it's almost like you most of the time Denzel plays these powerful characters, and I have no doubt in my mind at all that he wouldn't have been able to pull it off because I think he's amazing. To be honest, it would have been nice to see two black leads like next to each other in terms of like a buddy cop film, because you just don't see that. Like, I can't think of a buddy cop film off the top of my head where there is two black leads. So that would have been that would have been cool to see, and how Morgan Freeman and Denzel Washington would have played that, because it's always it is almost that cliche, isn't it? Like of the buddy cop, you've got the Lethal Weapon do it, Last Boy Scout.
You know, David Fincher was so worried about being compared to Lethal Weapon. That was a big thing here they talked about, which was people kind of saw it as another Lethal Weapon because, you know, at the time no one knew what Seven was. It was just another buddy cop film, you know?
Exactly.
Who knew it'd be anything else? So
exactly. So for that reason alone, I would love to see Denzel in it. Would it have been better or worse? Oh man, Seven's so good. So how could it be any better? But you never know. We don't know, do we? It's a really difficult question to ask, but a really interesting one. So thank you very much for that question. I've got another couple of questions on Seven. So what do you think the best death is, and what do you think the most clever death is? So I think I know. So I've got a couple. Shall I go first? What do you think?
Yeah, go for it.
So I think I'm going to pick two because I'm going to pure sell out for the cleverest death. So I think the cleverest death is, of course, when he kills Envy. So that is I think that's really clever because he essentially tricks everyone and gets the better of the cops. But I think the cleverest in terms of technical is got to be Sloth, when he keeps that guy still alive
for so long.
How do we describe that? Like, there's basically a guy.
We haven't even discussed the Sloth one, but there is literally a guy, and it's really funny. They talk about his landlord, and it says his landlord says he's the best guy. He pays on time, and his rent's never overdue. But it's a guy who was a paedophile who John Doe sets his sights on and thinks he's better than. Decides that, you know, I'm going to make him suffer. So he's tied down to bed. He's injected with drugs to keep him alive, isn't it? What they say in the hospital, but he's completely emaciated, and
is he not like a year? Like they walk in on him a year the day that he was caught. Like, correct. Basically, it's really clever. Like, so that's probably the cleverest.
Okay,
and I guess that's the best as well, probably because he's still alive when he's there. It's like really scary. So it is like a horror film. What do you reckon, Johnny, if I just stole yours?
I think for me, just the logistics of the head in the box is quite impressive. The fact they managed to get there directly on time and all that stuff. But no, genuinely.
DHL are so good.
So reliable. Nowadays, you have like the app saying your drivers tried to do an attempted delivery, but it's not worked out. They're not going out to the middle of the desert. But anyway, the murder that sticks out to me is there's the model. And they talk
God,
it's horrible.
Every single one of them. How could you the model.
And she has a phone glued to one hand, or what does she have on the other one? Oh, pills on the right, and it's the idea of cut your nose off to spite your face, and it says you can either live but not be beautiful, or you can die.
And he cut her nose off.
And he cut her nose off, so she decides to kill herself with the tablets. And again, just really, really grim.
And clever.
But also very clever.
Right, so we've got another one for Seven. What would you say is your most concerning deadly sin? So I think what this is from Film Forager, actually, who also wrote in last week.
Thank you very much for the follow as well.
Oh, bless her. Yeah, she's really nice. Chandra says, what was your most concerning deadly sin? I mean, I think she means in general, not in the film.
Yeah.
So for me, easily, it's got to be greed, because
I was going to say the same.
Because we're all greedy. We're all greedy, and there's nothing we can do about it. Everyone wants more, all the time. And that is definitely, for me, by far.
I was going to say, though, it's really hard because the greed and envy ones seem to blur the lines for me. Because if you're greedy, you're obviously envious of what someone's you're envious and want something else that someone else has, right? And that fuels greed. I don't know. Maybe I'm getting too deep into it.
No, you're not. No. I think,
that's kind of my takeaway from it. But when Jamie kindly sent me some of the questions so I could have a think about my answers. And when I saw that one, I was really struggling. And it got me thinking about the envy greed scenario. But, we've all seen something and thought, I really want that. And then if you see someone else has got it, you might end up buying it.
Yeah, I guess that, yeah. You are right, yeah. Greed and envy are just, they're both, yeah. Well, they're all sins, aren't they? All horrible. Anyway, so if you haven't noticed yet, which you probably won't have because you've literally got one episode to go off, or if you're just joining us, welcome. Basically, what we're going to do is every single time we're going to pair the film that we're discussing with another film that is maybe in some way related, not so obvious, and we're going to try and keep it a little bit more low-key. It's funny I say low-key because actually the film I'm pairing Seven with is a film called M from 1931 by Fritz Lang. So this film is obviously super, super famous, but to your average Joe, your normal viewer, maybe you haven't heard of a film from 1931, and that's perfectly fine. But you should definitely go and search this one out. So this is a German film, black and white, of course, because it's 1931. So it's a film about a child murderer. So it's pretty dark and really dark for those days. It's one of the first serial killer films which actually was ever made, and it's kind of paved the way for a lot of what we see today. So it's essentially about a serial killer that's going around killing children. The police are after him. The mob are also after him. So there's like a crime sort of like syndicate that they're also after him because it's basically ruining all their businesses with the amount of police that are around, and it's essentially a manhunt. So they're really annoyed as well. So yeah, it's the first film Fritz Lang made with sound, and one of the first films made with sound, I believe, one of the first talkies, as you'd call them. It's really, really interesting film. Johnny, you watched it as well. What did you think of it?
I really enjoyed it. I watched it last night. I really enjoyed it. A few things I really liked in it, which we've not really touched on yet, was the kind of the blame culture early on, because people don't know who the killer is. So people just start accosting people in the street. So a child walks over to this guy and says, "What's the time?" And he says, "Oh, it's whatever o'clock. Off you pop home." And straight away he's accosted by about 4 or 5 people threatening to batter him because he's just chatting to this child. And it's I thought that was quite resonant even today. That idea of you almost, I don't know if you find this, maybe it's a really bleak view of society, but people almost don't want to speak or help each other because they're just worried about what might come of it. It's kind of protecting yourself, Absolutely. And I want to go into that. Something that happens later on in the film that you're actually talking about, the sort of that the blame culture. I can't really say anything about the film that hasn't already been said in the last 90 years. It is an amazing performance by Peter Lorre. We all know that. Who am I to say anything? But what is really good, or really interesting, is the use of like dolly shots, the crane shots, and some of the single long shots technique, like that actually were like later like adopted by like Orson Welles and like Hitchcock and stuff. Like this is some of the first time we're seeing some of this stuff, and it's amazing, really. Johnny, did you notice any of that? I'm sure you did as a cameraman. I was amazed by some of the camera work, and someone pointed out when I was going through the IMDb trivia, and it talks about some American directors at the time looked and saw how far behind they were in filmmaking standards in comparison to Germany because of the things they were doing. But interestingly, Hitchcock kind of did a sabbatical over to Germany early on in his career, and I think you can tell from watching this film that kind of feel. The thing is, obviously with black and white films, a lot of because you haven't got colour, you use harsh contrast lighting to set mood, so big shafts of bright light and dark shadows. And I think this film utilises that a lot. But yes, some of the shots for the time it was done, are staggering, genuinely staggering. And there are a few where there's one where it goes through the glass window, which is something Alfonso Cuarón does a lot in Prisoner of Azkaban, which we talked about earlier. But his whole idea was peering into someone's world, like, and almost like spying on a scene. And also the idea of the camera can go anywhere. And a film in 1930 showing me that the camera can go anywhere is quite astounding, really.
Yeah, definitely. And it's so as well as that, there's no score in the film at all. And it was something me and Jonny like talked about very briefly, because we like to keep this is us talking about this film for the first time. But the thing we did that I actually loved, that Jonny was maybe a bit opposed to, is the contrast of sound to silence. So for me, the use of sound and the use of silence for me is amazing, because it's kind of like it's so deliberate, and the sound, when there is no sound, it's so the silence is deafening. The only music we've got in there, or any kind of music, is that whistle. I'll do it for you. It's for everyone in the UK. You'll know it as Alton Towers. I'm going to take away, move back from our mic. It's So you've got this like child murderer walking around whistling this tune, and it's so creepy and unnerving.
Yeah.
And it's scarier than a lot of the films you'd see today, like just because of the creepiness. And you don't see a drop of blood. You don't see anyone getting murdered. It's so clever in the way it deals with everything.
What's eerie with that is there's a shot where I think it's the first murder we see, but we don't see. The murderer goes along with a child to this blind man to buy a balloon, and the balloon is just in itself terrifying because it's an animal, like in the and it just looks creepy. And now it'd be used in something like It as a horror thing in itself. Anyway, she's really excited. She goes, "Oh, it's so pretty," and I'm thinking, "No, it's not. Oh my god." Anyway, she takes the balloon, and as Jamie said, you don't see anything, but she's also got a bouncy ball, hasn't she? So you just see the bouncy ball roll down the road, and the other thing you see is this balloon terrifyingly getting stuck between these two pylons in really aggressive wind. And obviously it's because the little girl's gone, but it is, you're right, it's really scary without, again, it's the whole idea of you don't need to be, we are obsessed now with trying to shock people by showing things. And it's the thing I've talked about, we've only done 2 episodes, but I've said it a lot of times. What you don't see is almost scarier than what you do see. We said it about Alien, and this again, we don't need to witness these murders to know they are awful. And again, you learn about this through the characters and how they react. So you see the mothers of these children. That's what's harrowing. The end of the film is literally a character saying, keep your children close, look after your children, right? Talk about a terrifying message to end the film.
It's a PG. It's a PG. Parental guidance. Guide your children to safety, because there's killers out there. Be careful. Anyway, so the only other thing I wanted to mention really was what Jonny touched upon earlier, is that by the end of the film, you're in this situation where it's almost like mob justice. So you've got this killer and he kills children. How can we ever forgive him? But somehow he essentially gets dragged into this underground place where this group of maybe about 100 people are shouting at him, accusing him, mob, like it's a pylon essentially. And we see it on, and it's funny because it's still relevant today in social media and stuff. One person does something and then they get piled on by loads of people that they don't even know. So you almost feel sorry for the killer in that situation, because what's happening is wrong, and they're almost as bloodthirsty as he is. And definitely it's going to be, for some of you that aren't into that kind of cinema, it's going to be a tough watch maybe, but it's 1931, it's German, it's black and white, but definitely just see the birth of this kind of film.
I really enjoyed it, but just another thing to just touch upon quickly from what Jamie said, which was with the sound. I said to him, I'm pretty sure they probably didn't use sound throughout because it'll be cost prohibitive at the time, and that's literally what the reason was. It was because at the time the equipment was very expensive, and having to use sound throughout would have done a lot. But the director made a point of saying, we'll never know if this is a retrospective thing, or he thought it at the time, but he said, I think the science works in an eerie way, and that's what you've said. But there was just one scene where the police were running through, and in my head I was thinking footsteps going, I want to hear footsteps and running down, and it wasn't coming, and I actually checked the sound bar. I thought, has the sound gone off? then the next bit I turned it right up, and the next thing that came out of me was when they're chasing him in the there's a building they they get him to. And it was suddenly really loud because, like alarms and stuff go off. And I thought, oh, God.
Yeah.
So anyway, I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
And I think, again, I'm not someone who watches lots of older cinema. So
well, I think you watch a lot more than a lot of people, to be honest, man. Like,
okay.
you're the person I go to talk about that kind of thing, because I love it. So like, you're the first person I go to, because I know you've probably seen it. And by the way, did you just admit to the cinephiles, all the cinephiles that listen to our podcast, the hundreds and hundreds of them, that you have a sound bar and not a 7.1 surround sound system?
If you really want to go there, I have a 5.1 surround in my home cinema room, which is also my office, but in the living room I just have a sound bar. So there you go.
Slumming it. He wanted to feel like he was in the 1930s. Jonny, what did you link it with?
I chose to link it with Alfred Hitchcock's Frenzy.
My God, the time.
I reckon so many people thought if they're doing serial killers, they are going to link it to Psycho. But no, I think a lot of people have either watched or studied Psycho because it's just that kind of film that people have seen. But Frenzy was one of Hitchcock's latest films. It was made in 1972. It's pretty much 10 years on from Psycho. And Jamie talked earlier about the idea of how what you could shoot and show in a film had changed over a period of time. And we were saying, what was shocking in 1930 isn't shocking now. But what was shocking even in the 60s, there's no blood in Psycho. It's in black and white, sorry. So you do see blood, but it's in black and white. But you see really very little. Can't say the same for Frenzy. Frenzy, you see a lot, really. It's quite traumatizing. I'd forgotten how violent it is, and it's not particularly bloody, but it's an 18. It's
I wasn't ready for it.
Yeah,
I was about to say that it's an 18. So I looked in my Hitchcock set, and so I think it's his second to last film that he made.
Correct. Yeah.
So I looked in my set, and it's like, so it's in between. Is it in between Topaz and Family Plot, or
Yes.
Torn Curtain?
Well, no, unfortunately, Torn Curtain is not great. Topaz again is.
I've heard it's really bad.
Yeah, Topaz is a film that he went on to disown.
But it was in between them. Mm-hmm. Yeah, 18. It's an 18. So yeah.
The thing is, it's very Hitchcock for a few reasons. You have the classic wrong man situation. A man's accused of a crime he did not commit.
Always.
So strangers on a train to catch thief, North by Northwest Frenzy. Hitchcock said we never know with Hitchcock because he was such a character what's true or what's not, but he said as a child his father said if you misbehave you'll be sent to prison, and then he did something wrong, so he actually gave him a night in a jail cell. Now, if this is actually true or it's one of those things that's become folklore, we'll never know, but it's apparently where the idea of the wrong man or being in trouble for something you didn't do came from. So that's in this film, which is very classic Hitchcock. The opening of the film's really interesting. So I know we talked about with Seven the idea of the opening setting the tone of the film, and I don't think Frenzy unfortunately falls into that for me. It's a very grandiose shot on this helicopter revealing London going down the Thames, but it's kind of Hitchcock's return to England. He hadn't made a film in England since the 50s. A lot of people thought he deserted British cinema at a time when they needed him because he sold out to Hollywood. And ironically, in Hollywood, he wasn't particularly, he wasn't recognised the way he thought he would have been. That's the reason he went over there. So this was his big return to England, and also a lot of the film takes place in a market setting, which is where his father worked when he was a kid. So there's a lot of Hitchcock returning to his roots here, and the opening establishing London as a location very much does that. Yeah. But it's funny because a lot of the actors are obviously English actors, and they complain saying it's written like an American film but taking place in London, so the dialogue didn't quite flow. And it's interesting. Well, you pointed this out to me that you thought some of the acting was a bit wooden, and I think it's the dialogue's a bit wrong. In an American film I think it actually would work, but it's just kind of misappropriated.
Yeah, so I found it was it's a strange film. Like the tone is very strange. Mm-hmm. And I tell you what, I'm going to compare it to something that will probably, like, people might switch off or they'll be like, damn, you are so right, and I get it. So like it's super colorful, it's so 70s, like it's literally like oozing, like you can tell it's gone from the 60s to the 70s in the way Jonny said, with how sort of exploitative it is almost. Yes. And so I found the acting pretty hammy, but I also felt like it was quite intentional, and apparently it was quite low budget as well, the film.
Yeah.
So for me, like it's really weird. And Johnny, I'm almost certain you haven't seen this film because you're not into this type of cinema. But it really reminded me of a Lucio Fulci film, The New York Ripper. Which is because of the nudity, the violence, the sexual violence. I was so shocked because it was a Hitchcock film. Like, I can't believe I'm sitting here watching a Hitchcock film. Like, and yeah, it blew my mind.
Hitchcock did kind of like to show the physical struggle of acts. And what makes Frenzy a really hard watch, like a modern film, is there is a rape scene and it plays out.
Yeah.
The entire thing plays out, and it is shocking for that reason. But also, not only is that takes place, there's then the murder. Now, Psycho was really good at depicting the effort of not only killing someone, because how many times is she stabbed in the shower? It's a lot of times. But also the effort of having to tidy up the crime scene and then get rid of the car. And he does this again in this. It's the effort of not only, I've got to kill her, then I've got to sort the body out, then I've got to do this. And he lingers on these things that we don't want to see, but you can't escape. And that's what he does. He talked about the idea of make your audience feel as uncomfortable as possible. And this was another reason why I've linked it to this film, because David Fincher said when he was making Seven that you should. He's always interested in the idea of films that scar, and he highlighted something like Jaws then makes you not want to go in the sea. But then, you've got Frenzy. There's some really good cinematography in there. I know Hitchcock's wife Alma had a stroke during the making of this film, so he went to care for her. So I don't actually know which bits he did shoot and which bits he didn't, but I will take away from what I think are Hitchcock shots. And there's a scene, two key scenes which stick out for me. He invites a victim home. They don't know this guy's the murderer. And there is a shot where he says, "You're my kind of girl," which we know is the link to him attacking this woman. And as he says it, there's a shot which tracks backwards down the stairs on a dolly, all the way down the stairs, keeps going back, and then there's no noise. And then you see a potato sack come past, and you're in the streets, and you see the market, and you hear lots of noise. And the idea of the noise is there is to show that even if she screams, no one's going to hear it. But this shot lingers for about 15 to 20 seconds. And what's brilliant is I had to read how this happened, how they did this, because I couldn't work out how they'd filmed it. The track for the dolly was on the ceiling. So that's how the camera does the move, because I think there's no way how.
It is amazing, yeah,
that
definitely.
Amazing. And then there's another scene before that, which is a murder has taken place in this office, and we see the murderer leave. And then as we see the murderer leave, he goes out one way, and the receptionist who's been on her lunch break comes back in to go into the office. And the shot is just the street. And you see her go in through the door, and it just holds the shots for 15 to 20 seconds. You just hear the noise of the street.
It's ages, isn't it?
Some people walking past, and you're waiting for the scream. The tension builds because you go, someone's going to find the body. Someone's going to find the body. Scream. And it shocks you. And it's just brilliant because it's just making you feel so uncomfortable. And that's what Hitchcock does best for me. It makes you feel uncomfortable, but there is still Hitchcock comedy, and as Jamie said, it stands out a bit. There's a police detective who goes home with his wife who's trying French cooking for the first time, and it's really odd, and I'll be honest, it's quite out of place, but
the tone's all over the place.
It harks back to that Hitchcock era of like 50s, 60s where you could get away with that, but it's a great film. It's a really great film. The tone is all over the place though, and it was really nice to see Hitchcock dive into sort of 70s, like be around in the 70s to be there to do that, because that is the 70s is when sort of exploitation cinema came out, and that's why I was like, God, this is so close to being an exploitation piece. Like it's a whisker away, and that's why I was like, right, this is so Fulci, like the New York Ripper. Like I really would love to see. I haven't researched it or anything, so I'd love to see if I'm sure New York Ripper was before Frenzy. No, it might not have been. I don't know, and I'm not going to look it up. But I'd love to see if one of them was inspired by the other. I would love to see that. But yeah, this has been again. We're going to keep it at 60 minutes, but guess what? It ain't going to be 60 minutes. You're going to be 90 minutes because you're getting your money's worth. As soon as we said David Fincher, you knew it was going to be over 60 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. You're getting your money's worth because you paid nothing. So that's good. Right. So we've got another question, and I haven't even thought about this. So I'm going to have to think on the spot. This is from my mate Patch. And he knows I've been watching The Lord of the Rings in 4K. Trust me, they're amazing. But they've got the DNR, which is not very good, digital noise reduction. But we won't talk about that, Jonny, because then it'll be 3-hour podcast. Right, to mark the Lord of the Rings 4K, if you could adapt a book series into a trilogy of movies, what would you choose?
Oh, that is a good question.
I am quite a reader. I mostly only read fantasy books, though. I guess, off the top of my head... well... Do you know what? As it's a Fincher episode, and I know this is such a cop-out, I just want to see Fincher do the rest of the Girl with the Dragon Tattoo.
I was watching the behind the scenes of that, and Hitchcock, sorry, I'm on Hitchcock mode. Fincher was so behind the idea of having this massive series that the studio backed, but it was still, 15 or 18 rated. And it's a real shame it didn't make the money, but it released at the wrong time. At this point, it's when the Hobbits were coming out every year at Christmas, and it came out around the same time. And I remember I saw The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo with my dad on Boxing Day. It's not exactly an uplifting Boxing Day film, right? You go to the cinema on Boxing Day to watch, Star Wars or whatever, and then all of a sudden you're watching Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. We'll talk about that at a later date. I would have loved to seen those sequels. I agree. I've read all 3 books. I really enjoy them, and I know.
Well, there's like 5 now.
Yeah, I would have loved to seen him complete that trilogy. I'd agree with that. I really enjoy the Expanse as a TV series, but I think that would have made a good trilogy of films.
Oh God, yeah,
but it's pretty difficult with the amount they have to cover. Maybe it is better suited for TV. I've read some of the Bond books which were written post Ian Fleming, and
just so you know, they have made Bond books into films. I'm not sure if you know.
I said post Ian Fleming for that reason.
Oh, sorry. Oh God, the egg and my face are in perfect alignment. What do you mean post Ian Fleming? As in, like, there's other books that.
Yeah, when he died, there were a lot of authors who took on the mantle of writing books, in his style, but not by him. And there's other Bond books which were... I'd love to see a Bond trilogy, I'm sure eventually we'll talk about Daniel Craig Bond films, but I really, really enjoy Casino Royale. I like the fact Quantum was a semi-sequel. I quite enjoyed Spectre, but I kind of wish with Bond, they either do a proper trilogy of stuff with a coherent story, because what happened was there was a 4th Bond film which tried to tie them all in together, and it was all retcon kind of tie-in rather than being so maybe that's a cop-out, but what I'm saying is if the next Bond is, let's say, Tom Hardy or whoever it is, and they just commit to here's a 3-story arc and that's a one and done, and maybe it's like set in the 60s or something, I'd love that. I'd really enjoy that. I like there's people talk about the idea of Bond working best in that kind of post-war era, and his background being World War II, and that's kind of what I enjoy.
That'd be pretty cool. Yeah,
I'd love that.
Who would you pick? Who would you choose as Bond, your next Bond?
I hate
gun
people
to your head
who do this, so I'm not going to say much, but
there we go. Just leave it then, don't worry about it. Just do it. The viewers want it
right now.
Yeah, right now.
I've picked Tom Hardy, but I wouldn't have him be... Everyone thinks I picked Tom Hardy to be a physical unit like Daniel Craig, but I get him to do completely the other end. I get him to go suave. I wouldn't get him to do physical. They've got a blunt instrument. I want him the other side. I want him to
He's a posh Englishman. He's a proper posh Englishman. Yeah.
But I want him in World War II. Well, no, not World War II. I want him in the 60s. I want him post World War II as Bond is in the books. That's what I would like.
Oh, the name's Bond, James Bond. Like in his little, you can do his little Bane voice. Yeah, exactly.
He did that for Dunkirk as well, actually.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, so he did. Yeah. Right. So we have another film. Another question. Mm-hmm. Again, putting us on the spot. This is from CJ.Reens on Instagram. One of our very good friends. He actually designed the logo of the podcast. So go give him a follow. I'm sure he'd be happy to commission you some stuff. And he's absolutely fantastic and a lovely guy. So which film is guaranteed to get you laughing in one scene and crying in another?
Oh,
well.
I've got a few for this, but I think Jamie might have some
have you?
Ones. Yeah.
Well, go on then. You go first then. It's all right. I can think.
I am an absolute sucker for La La Land, and I think in that film there are scenes where I'll be laughing along, happy as Larry with the situation, and then by the end of that film, I won't say I cry, but I would say it emotionally drains me.
Yeah, God, yeah. Do you know, that's such a good one that hadn't even come to mind, which you've actually just reminded me of one that definitely, which is The Perks of Being a Wallflower.
How did I not say that when I watched it 2 weeks ago? Did I talk about that on the podcast last week?
No, you didn't. No.
Okay, I watched Perks of Being a Wallflower for the first time after Jane recommended it, and I am slightly obsessed with it. I think it's brilliant, and again, you're right. It's one of those films where you so want thing. Hopefully we'll talk about. I say this about every film we talk about, but hopefully
don't spoil it. Don't spoil it.
It's a film where you can relate, even though I haven't been to an American high school. There are enough situations in that film depicted that you feel like you can relate, and that film, you know, it keeps you guessing with what's going on, but it doesn't do. Someone talked about this really well. It doesn't do dramatic reveals. It's just life. It's happened.
Yeah, it's a heartbreaker, isn't it?
It doesn't make a big deal. It doesn't make a big deal of things, you know, because you know in a normal teen thriller, if there's something's happened and it's a big dramatic moment, big music, and this film isn't that. It's the complete opposite, and it's so good. It's really hard to talk about it without talking about it, so I'm going to stop.
I think you and I definitely have a really similar way in which we are like drawn in emotionally, because we both really love La La Land for the same reasons. Is that it's a celebration of sort of Hollywood, but then also like it rips your heart out as well, and it's not the happy ending. Perks of Being a Wallflower, I watched it, but completely blind watch, and it like. Honestly, tears were rolling down my face by the end of it. The only other film is obviously Dead Easy, mentioned it earlier, which is Coco. So Coco, God, oh man, it has you laughing sometimes. And then there is that bit in Coco which is probably the saddest thing I've ever seen in a film ever, and has me bawling every time. So I am a bit of a crier actually when it comes to films. Like, if it's the right film, I will be greeting. Okay, so you might be able to answer. So this we've got 2 questions left. So one of them, I will address the question, but we're not going to answer it this week. We're going to answer it in future podcasts. And it's essentially the question of separating the art from the artist. We will answer it at some point, but now it's probably not the time. Like, it's our second episode, and we don't want to get cancelled. So we'll wait until we've got 1,000 listeners before you all decide to cancel us. All right. So anyway, we're gonna skip that question, and we're gonna come back to you. Right. So the last question is from another friend on Instagram, Big Al. And he says, what was the best and worst blind buy you have ever got? I think I know off the top of my head. I've got 2 really bad blind buys. So one of them was Student Bodies, which is, I think it's an 88 Films release. It's just one of those, it's a slasher, but it's a slasher comedy, but the jokes just are not funny in any way, shape or form. But I can kind of forgive it. I just really didn't enjoy it. The other one, which is unforgivable, it's a film called Rabid. So it's funny because it's a film called Rabid, but it also has a really similar cover to a film called Raw, both yellow covers. Now Raw is a absolutely fantastic French film, horror film, about a girl that is essentially like eating flesh, and it's brilliant, and we'll talk about it at some point. So please do not confuse Raw with Rabid, which is garbage, to the point of where the directors decide that they want to be in the film. So the directors are in the film, in a scene, and it's rubbish. It's just really, really rubbish. And do you know what? I can't even remember what it's about, but all I need to tell you is Rabid from probably about 2014 or something. It's just not good. 2019, sorry. It was literally 2 years ago. But obviously because of COVID, it feels like it was about 10 years ago. It is about a traffic accident damages a woman's face. She gets experimental stem cell treatment, leaving her stronger and prettier than ever. But there's a side effect.
Classic.
And guess what? That side effect is shite. So just leave it alone. Sorry, little tangent there. The best blind buy I've got, easily, probably The Handmaiden by Park Chan-wook. Fantastic film. I'm not going to go into too much because we are running really, really long tonight. So that's probably, and Thirst as well by Park Chan-wook. It's just Park Chan-wook. Park Chan-wookie work, like he's the best. I love him. Jonny, best and worst blind buys.
That's really hard because I'll be honest, I'm usually a person who rents, and I'm really bad for reading IMDb before I actually get into stuff. But
right,
I'd say when I was younger, I remember blind buying The Island and thinking it was great. I don't know if I think the same thing now, but I used to.
Oh, The Island?
Yeah.
Is that with Ewan McGregor?
Yeah, I used to really like that film. I've
never seen it.
It's Michael Bay.
Oh, Michael Bay.
I remember buying that thinking, this is great. I think, look, if you buy a DVD, I say buy a DVD, this is a while ago. If you buy a DVD and you don't know what you're getting and you see a film that's like a 6 out of 10, and I'd say we chatted about this before, it's probably in that territory, but I thoroughly enjoyed it at the time. So, yeah.
And that's what that matters, isn't it? There's someone out there that Rabid, unfortunately, Rabid is someone's favourite film. Like, it is.
Probably.
Like, because and yeah, that's just the way it is. They're probably the best and worst blind buys. I tend to blind, so I do collect Blu-rays and DVDs. Well, not DVDs as such. I've got loads of DVDs, but I'm slowly upgrading. But I collect Blu-rays, whereas Jonny is a bit more particular. Is that right?
I would say that I'm very much a rent it unless I think I'm going to rewatch. But then the problem is with that is the other day I said, I'm only going to rent Underwater because I probably won't watch it again. Then I loved it. And then I said, I've just spent £4 on the rental and now I'm going to buy it again. But hey, that's how it is.
Unfortunately, guys, that is it for another 2 weeks. You're gonna have to sit there waiting. I don't even know how long we've been running, but who cares, because I've enjoyed myself, Jonny's enjoyed himself, and I really, really hope you guys have enjoyed yourselves. The one thing I do want to mention is I just want to say thank you so much for everyone who's listened, everyone who's downloaded, everyone who's subscribed, because the feedback has been absolutely wonderful. And I don't even say words like wonderful. Please, what would be even better is if you could go on whatever podcast service you use and rate us 5 stars. We only accept 5-star ratings. Thank you very much. I am at Movies in a Nutshell. Come and speak to me, and you can message me. What do you want us to cover? Let us know what films you want us to talk about next, and we'll be more than happy, unless it's Rabid. Jonny?
Just as Jamie said, thank you so much to everybody who supported us so far. It's been so great seeing the feedback from everybody. We were really pleasantly surprised, and yeah, it's been great. And again, make sure you give Movies in a Nutshell a follow. And also, I'm at jcb.video on Instagram. If you've got any questions you want to put to us, just get us through there. And then, yeah, look forward to the next one.
Awesome. See you guys later.